Welcome back, ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Arey. So this last episode of What If had a lot going on with the Infinity Stones, Ultron, Easter eggs aplenty, and a lot of you had questions that you shouted out to me on Twitter and in our comments section. So I'm going to answer all of your questions and attempt to solve all the plot holes, including how the Infinity Stones are able to work in other timelines. So let's get started. A lot of you were wondering how Natasha knew that Zola was in the super soldier facility in Siberia.
Arnim Zola was a Hydra scientist who infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D. in its infancy.
Now, she was a Russian agent for years, so it seems like she could have known from her time as a KGB operative, except she didn't even know Bucky was working for her own government.
Most of the intelligence community doesn't believe he exists. The ones that do call him the Winter Soldier.
Also, Natasha never tells Steve that there are other super soldiers made from his blood, which I'm sure she would have done if she knew. She definitely could have been a much bigger help in Civil War. So the most logical explanation is that she learned this from S.H.I.E.L.D.'s leaked files. After all, this is how Zemo found out.
Millions of pages, much of it encrypted, not easy to decipher.
And it took Zemo a while to decrypt the files, but Nat is a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent who speaks Russian. She would have been able to decode the information much faster than Zemo. Quite Handsome on Twitter asked who Steve's running mate was. Remember, we see Steve Rogers being sworn in as president in the background here. Well, I have an answer for you, but you may not like it. I pointed this out in our Easter egg video, but there is a musical playing in Times Square called The Olympian, and we saw this in a previous episode when Loki conquered Earth here. And that episode ends with Steve Rogers being unfrozen and Carol arriving on Earth. So let's assume that this is the same universe. Steve Rogers saves the world. Everything is now in shambles, and the people demand that he reluctantly accept the mantle of leadership. The ideal choice for him as a running mate would be a woman of color. Or maybe his running mate was Carol Danvers, and the two of them are going to form some kind of superpowered oligarchy that seeks to solve all of the world's problems through control. After all, we see that Steve is resistant to government authority in Civil War.
We may not be perfect, but the safest hands are still our own.
And even in First Avenger, he flaunts the government's rules regarding what makes somebody suitable for combat. And if he's so convinced that he knows more than the authority figures, then he would probably take control of the world himself with Carol as his second in command. Or maybe he picked like Tulsi Gabbard or Nikki Haley, I don't know, Monica Rambeau. Sure, let's go with that. Tell me who you think Steve's running mate would be down in the comments. So when we see Ultron conquering other worlds, we see the Guardians fighting for the Sovereign. Now this is where they were fighting at the beginning of Guardians Volume 2.
Groot, get out of the way, you're gonna get hurt! Hi!
But hold on, Guardians Volume 2 takes place 6 months after Guardians 1, which takes place in 2014. And we also see that Ego is still alive, meaning that this had to happen at the beginning of Guardians 2. But also, Vision says that Tony's been Iron Man for 8 years, but Homecoming says that Civil War was 5 years after the Avengers. Okay, wait. We put out a video that explains the entire MCU timeline. Basically, not every movie takes place in the year that it was released. But even if Guardians does take place in August 2014, the month it was released, then 6 months later would place it in 2015, the year when Age of Ultron takes place and was released. So the timelines kind of match up. But even if they didn't, we're talking about the multiverse here, so there are lots of tiny variations along the way. For instance, in this episode of What If, Clint is right-handed where he's a lefty in the MCU. So we even see these variations in the different timelines that make up the sacred timeline. But wait, hang on. Ultron visits other planets after Thanos obtains the Infinity Stones, which was years after Guardians 2 because Groot has grown into a teenager.
And Groot.
So that means that in this universe, Ego had a harder time tracking down Peter because he's still alive and the Guardians have not killed him. Maybe this is because Ultron using the Mind Stone affected the universe on a cosmic level, kind of like how Thanos using the stones created a shockwave.
Earth became ground zero for a power surge of ridiculously cosmic proportions. No one's ever seen anything like it.
If that's the case, then Thanos could have started his quest for the stones earlier. Or maybe in this universe, the Guardians just got a late start. It took them a hot minute to get around to protecting the Sovereign. And I'm not even going to get into how time works differently when you travel through space according to the gravity of the planet you inhabit. Let's move on. So one thing I love about this show is that everyone can relate to the premise, what if? What if I caught that ball? What if I didn't catch that ball? And unfortunately, one day we might all be asking, what if I had done more to prevent climate change? Every day there's more bad news related to the effects of global warming, hurricanes, fires, floods, and we don't have an Avengers to save our planet. But that's where Ren comes in. They're the sponsor of this video. Ren is a site that helps you to calculate your carbon footprint. It's a very easy, small step that each of us can take to solve the climate crisis. So here's how it works. You take a short quiz that estimates your carbon footprint and offers advice on how to reduce it. Then, to help offset your carbon footprint, you can make a donation to plant trees and save rainforests. rainforest, which in turn reduces carbon dioxide, creates oxygen, and we can all breathe easy until this whole thing blows over. After you sign up for your contributions, you receive monthly updates from the tree planting, rainforest protection, and other projects you support. You actually get to see the trees you planted, so you know that your money is well spent. So if you want to see how you can do your part to combat climate change, visit Ren.co. Ren will plant 10 extra trees for the first 100 people who sign up with our referral link in the description. Spike Blackfire asks how Thanos got the Soul Stone if Gamora was still on the planet with the Guardians. Now you remember from Infinity War that the Soul Stone can only be obtained by sacrificing that which you love.
Soul for a soul.
Except, that's not the only way to get the Soul Stone, is it? Several people carried the Soul Stone in Endgame, and both Bruce and Tony used it without giving up someone they loved. So the answer is, Thanos arrives on Vormir, the Red Skull says, "Oh, sorry, you have to sacrifice someone you love." So Thanos leaves Vormir. He finds a nice family somewhere, and he says, "Do you love her?" "Yes." "Do you?"
Yes!
He takes this nice couple to Vormir, and he forces one of them to sacrifice the other and says, "I'll kill your kids if you don't do this." Then, one of them sacrifices that which they love, and Thanos kills that person and takes the stone.
Dude.
What? It's logical, right?
That is messed up.
Yeah, well, you're a dog. I once saw you eat a dead bird.
That is a fair point.
But there is another plot hole. Ultron destroys Xandar, the planet that housed the Power Stone after Guardians 1. But Thanos had already destroyed Xandar.
Because he stole it last week when he decimated Xandar.
So why does Xandar look so darn nice? Well, for one, maybe in this reality Thanos didn't wreck the whole place. He might have gotten the Space Stone first and neatly slipped in and out. Maybe. Or, remember, in the comics, Xandar and the Nova Corps get destroyed like all the time. They're Marvel's version of the Jedi Order. So they could have rebuilt after Thanos destroyed the planet. Some poor old guy just finishes painting the last building and boom, Ultron.
Great googly moogly.
Along these same lines, Robert Vaughn asks how Thanos got the Time Stone without Ultron noticing. I mean, I'm going to guess that after the planet was devastated in nuclear war, Thanos arrived on Earth and picked it up from the wreckage of Karmartaj. Or maybe the sorcerers defended themselves from the attack, then they would have hidden the Time Stone in another dimension. But I think that Thanos could use the Reality Stone to break through dimensional gateways and recover it. After all, we do see him break through the mirror dimension. And we had lots of questions about the Vision. Michael Pereira asked, why didn't Vision just slice Thanos in half? Well, because he was injured by Corvus Glaive's staff. He couldn't even phase or join any fights until the very end of the movie. It could also be that this wouldn't have occurred to Vision. Ultron sees every problem as a simple equation. Problem, no problem. On or off. Dead, alive. If Thanos rushed to get the stones without doing a full recon of Earth and Vision, then I can see him not preparing to slice Vision's body with a special staff first. So is Vision strongest Avenger? Yeah, I think in his time he definitely was the strongest Avenger. His handicap was that he was figuring out himself, who he was, where the stone came from, and how his new body worked. He also had emotional baggage and curiosity that made him more human, but also made him fallible, like when he was worried about Wanda and accidentally hurt Rhodey.
Became distracted. I didn't think that was possible. Neither did I.
Whereas Ultron created this body for himself. He knew everything the body was capable of. Epitome of Irony asks why Jarvis didn't overpower Ultron like he did in the movie. Well, Jarvis never overpowered Ultron. Ultron tore the AI Jarvis apart, and then he spent the whole movie reassembling himself. But if you mean why didn't he keep him from launching the nukes, it's because he failed. He just wasn't able to. Or maybe you mean why didn't he burn Ultron out of the net like in the movie? Well, that wasn't Jarvis doing this. This was Vision. A hybrid of Jarvis, vibranium, human tissue, and most importantly, some of Ultron's base consciousness that had already been uploaded into the body.
I wouldn't call it dreams. It's Ultron's base consciousness.
So Ultron did pass on a piece of himself to his offspring. So Vision would have been able to inhabit the same neural pathways and block Ultron out of the internet. No cat videos for you, Ultron. And some of you asked why Vision wasn't voiced by Paul Bettany. Well, the only reason Vision had Paul Bettany's voice was because Jarvis was placed in his body.
I want to help you put Jarvis in this thing.
Keys EG asks, how was Ultron able to hear the Watcher? Was he slowly gaining a more conscious ability to peek through different dimensions as he's constantly evolving? So, in the comics, there's this thing called cosmic awareness. When a character obtains a certain level of cosmic power, they level up and can sense the universe on a higher plane. For instance, in the comics, Carol Danvers has cosmic awareness. In the MCU, we actually see Doctor Strange gain cosmic awareness in What If. So Ultron, after using the Infinity Stones for so long, finally reaches the end of his mission.
It's is done.
When this happens, he allows himself a moment of stillness to simply exist, and in this moment of quiet, he comes to better understand the cosmos and the stones. That's how he becomes aware of the Watcher. Total Nerdster had a great question. How could we see Ultron invading another dimension in the last episode of What If, and why did the Watcher seem surprised?
Wait, what?
Well, that invasion scene likely occurs after this episode, but as for the Watcher being surprised, he is not the only Watcher. He is the Watcher assigned to Earth, and there are Watchers assigned to watch every single planet. And there are other Watchers in the multiverse. So this is likely another Uatu from another timeline. Moonlight Joe asks, did the Infinity Ultron happen because Kang died? Otherwise the TVA would have interfered. Well, Moonlight Joe, I'm not so sure about that. The TVA didn't interfere every single time a branch in the timeline occurred. They didn't even bother with the Avengers.
We're not here to talk about the Avengers.
Oh no?
No. What they did was supposed to happen.
They only care when there is an event that threatens the sacred timeline. But that being said, Marvel did say that What If is airing after Loki because it shows the effects of the multiverse. So I do think that these timelines are possible because He Who Remains was killed and Sylvie did a bad job running the TVA. Angel Story asks, where are the Eternals? Well, we know from the trailers that they've vowed not to interfere in any of humanity's affairs unless it involves the deviants. So that's pretty much it. They answer to the Celestials, and those are not the space gods that you want to cross.
To mow down entire civilizations like wheat in a field.
A lot of people wondered why Ultron was able to so easily use the stones and everybody else died or was injured. Well, he is made of vibranium and self-healing tissue, and he was actually created from the Mind Stone, giving him a link to all the other stones. His body was essentially created to house Infinity Stones, and his consciousness was formed from Infinity Stones. The Infinity Stones all share a kind of wisdom, so this is kind of like all of the stones coming home to work together. And finally, many of you asked why the stones work outside of their own dimensions. In the comics, the Infinity Stones only work in their own realities, and in Loki, we saw that they don't work at all in the TVA.
Some of the guys use them as paperweights.
But I think this is because the TVA is in the quantum realm, a place where time and physics have no meaning.
A reality where all concepts of time and space become irrelevant.
So if you were to take the stones into another of the freaky weird universes in Doctor Strange, they may not work there either. But we already saw that the time stone worked in another universe, the Dark Dimension.
This is time. Endless looped time.
And of course, all the Infinity Stones that Bruce and Tony snapped with came from other timelines in the multiverse. Now, removing them from the timeline makes that reality vulnerable to outside threats from the multiverse, but you can use the Infinity Stones in a universe that obeys the same laws of physics. These universes, the ones that obey the laws of the Infinity Stones, are the ones that the Watcher observes. He even says so in the credits.
Time. Space.
But do you have any other questions from this episode of What If? Let me know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and ring that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Arey.